Good evening and welcome to Q&A's High School Special. I'm Tony Jones and here to answer your questions tonight, William Gillett from the Loxton High on the River Murray in South Australia. Recently re-elected New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian. Aurora Matchett from St Patrick's, Sutherland, an advocate for disability who lives with severe hearing loss. Willoughby Duff from Keneally Baptist School, Perth, who describes himself as a young Conservative. Labor's Deputy Senate Leader and Shadow Minister of Immigration, Kristina, Keneally, and Gosford High's Varsha, Yajman, who helped organise the school strike for climate. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. Q&A is live in Eastern Australia on ABC TV, iView and News Radio. Well, this is our fourth high school special. We're very happy to have the people who've auditioned join us here on this high school special. Hundreds of students, in fact, auditioned, and these four have joined two politicians tonight to answer the questions from the audience. Now, you're going to see the leaders of tomorrow. We're very excited to do that, so we'll go straight to our very first question, and it's from Daphne Fong.
150,000 young people in Australia and 1.5 million across the world attended the school strike for climate in March this year. Both major parties dismissed the strikes and told these young people to go back to school. Since then, we've seen increasing investment in fossil fuel, the approval of the Adani mine, a disappointing outcome for our regional neighbours at the Pacific Leaders Forum, and Queensland Labor changing its stance to pro-coal. How do you expect young people to support either of these major parties when both seem to be complicit on destroying our air, land and water resources?
Well, let's hear first from our student panellists. Varsha, we'll start with you.
All right, well, I don't think we can support any of these parties when they aren't supporting what we need. They aren't giving us a sustainable future, because climate change is more than just about recycling or saving the Great Barrier Reef. It's a civilization wake-up call. We need to do something about it, and these strikes are mobilizing young people. And on this September 20th, we're having a global strike. So this global strike is about workers, it's about students, it's about every single person. Because what we need to do is we need to build a mass mobilization, put pressure on our government, and actually get some action done.
Now, Varsha, I'm going to bring you to part of that question, which was, do young people, do you in particular, trust the major parties?
No, I don't think we can, because I think the reason that we have people in government is to support our views or is to make decisions for us as a majority. But the thing is, they aren't making any decisions that are actually needed. We keep putting our economic crisis at the forefront, but we aren't taking care of our climate when both of them are cyclically linked. We need to work on our climate, and therefore we can work on our economy.
Now, Willoughby Duff, you are a member of the Liberal Party, so you probably trust at least one of them.
Yes, I do, Tony. Thank you for your question, Daphne, and I do think it is important that we do act on climate change. At the same time as well, I know Varsha mentioned about the economy. We need to remember that the coal industry not only makes thousands of jobs for regional Australians as well, but it also makes up a lot of our exports as well. So it's actually creating and generating billions of dollars for the Australian economy, and that's something that we really do need to bear in mind. In terms of what action's being taken now, I understand the Liberal Party has implemented a climate solutions fund. Whether this will be effective is to be seen.
You don't sound very confident, Willoughby.
Oh, well, can't speculate too much on the future, Tony.
No. We are here to talk about the future, though.
Yes,
Kristina,
yes.
you just heard the Labor Party seemed to have a sort of antagonism to the coal industry prior to the election. All changed now.
Look, the first thing I want to say is you made the point about both political parties saying that you shouldn't be doing that. I have to say, I say go for it. You know, I took my two kids out of school in 2006 to go to the Your Rights at Work protest. They both graduated from high school. They're both productive members of society. They both have jobs. And I wanted them to learn from that point that there are things that are worth doing. There are things that are worth fighting for. And if you want things to change in your society, you actually have to stand up and make your voice heard. And so I often reflect too. I had a teacher that said to me once, never let your coursework get in the way of your education. And the point of that is not that you should be wagging school willy-nilly to go out and do a range of things, but there are things worth fighting for. And if you truly believe in fighting for it, you need to make your voice heard. And so I congratulate Varsha and those people who've done that. But let me say this. When it comes to the issue of climate change, we have a circumstance now, after a decade of climate wars, where we are actually going backwards. The past 4 years, emissions have been going up. We are not going to meet, this country is not going to meet the weak 20% emissions reduction target. We're going to miss it by 19%, a whopping 19%. The government says we are meeting these targets in a canter. We're not even walking, we're going backwards. We need to be galloping. This is the future of the planet. And one of the things I would have liked to have seen at the last election is an end to those climate wars. And Labor did seek to and offer support for the National Energy Guarantee, but the government walked away from that as well.
Kristina,
business
Kristina, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Go back to our question to Daphne. You asked a question which implied scepticism of both major parties. Are you feeling less sceptical hearing what Kristina is saying?
Yes, a little more, but I still feel like more needs to be done on both sides, especially in terms of the Queensland Parliament as well and their new stance.
Look, I don't want a focus on one particular coal mine, which is what happened in the election, distract from the overall issue of our climate. And yet Great Barrier Reef is a big part of it. I mean, the government threw $500 million, $500 million to a small private foundation and said, job done, Great Barrier Reef solved. It's not solved. So these are the challenges. There are a range of challenges here. Coal is going to be part of our future. Let's make no mistake about it. We cannot transition overnight to a no-coal economy.
All right, let me go to Aurora. What do you think about that notion, Aurora? And whether Daphne's question is correct, that young people are, by and large, sceptical of the major parties?
I mean, I really believe in what Kristina is saying here. Her truth doesn't really inspire me that the government will do something about it and, not focusing on one particular mine. I really think that's important. We need to focus on the whole problem as a whole and not just that one mine, not just that one reef. It's a whole country that's dealing with this climate crisis.
William, what do you think?
I believe that the government has been keeping to their goals and objectives. So we've seen them going above and beyond with the Paris Climate Agreement, keeping to it and looking like they're going to achieve the Kyoto Agreement too. And yeah, I think they've been keeping on track with their climate agreements.
What do you think about your school colleagues going on strike to support stronger action against climate change?
Where I live, we don't have that sort of issue. Kids, because there are a lot of kids that aren't where I live that don't really believe in this climate change as much as strongly. And although I'm not a strong believer in it either, I still think it's good if you want to take a stand in what you believe in and feel free to, because that's where our great country is. We have freedom of speech and a right to speak our beliefs.
Gladys.
Daphne, can I thank you for your question? And I don't blame you for expressing yourself the way you have. There's no doubt that climate change is one of the biggest issues of your generation. In my generation, it was about nuclear war and stopping nuclear war. In your generation, it's climate change. And can I encourage you to think collectively and creatively about how you can get your specific voice across? We understand everybody cares about climate change, but tell us exactly where you feel we can make a difference as a community and try and affect change that way. Can I say that I organised a protest once during school hours, but it was actually at school, so I was creative. So I am someone who believes, I look back on my school years, I went to a public school, and they were the best years of my life. And every day at school I learnt something new, whether it was in the classroom or in the playground through one of my friends. So I would suggest to all of you, please use every minute you have at school, on school, to talk about the issues. For example, if there is a global strike or something on that day, why don't you speak to your principal or teachers about having a forum or something in your school where you can pass motions and actually write to your local members saying this is what our school believes and this is what we want to change. So,
what if they want to go out with other young people and protest in the street together?
Do you know what?
To show some kind of solidarity?
I encourage protest, but outside of school hours. I think you should protest on school grounds if you maybe ask permission from your teachers, but I strongly believe that school is there for a reason, and I benefited enormously. I never thought one day I'd be the Premier of New South Wales, but it was because of my schooling, my inspirational teachers, and if we felt strongly about something, we'd go and talk to them about it. Why not organise a debate or a forum, or, you know, I think there are so many creative ways to get your point across, but please don't feel we're not listening to you. We are. I get it every day. One of my favourite things in my job is visiting schools, whether it's primary or high schools, and I tell you, every child, no matter where they live, which part of New South Wales raises climate change with me, or plastic bags, or something to do with the environment. So please know we hear you, and maybe the next step is knowing that we're hearing you. What would you like us to specifically do? And I'd also say I appreciate that when you feel there's inaction, that the parties aren't doing enough for you. I would say, well, hold us to account. Make us accountable, join our ranks, doesn't matter which side, but be part of the system, be part of the change, because I tell you, when young people get together and have a strong voice, it makes a difference. You can affect change, and that's the one thing I learnt when I was younger, and that's what gave me the confidence to get into politics, is you can make a difference. Your voice matters. Don't think it doesn't. Okay. And we appreciate it.
I'll go back quickly to Varsha, because I think you might... I mean, the suggestion from the Premier is you can do all of this within school. Why not? Why do you need to strike and leave the school grounds?
With all due respect, I think the fact that we have, like, as young people, we definitely have tried to make our point that we want just transitions, that we want to see renewable energy come into picture. And the fact that we haven't seen this makes us want to strike, because it's saying that our education is important, but if there's no future, then what's the point of having an education? If we're having a low quality of life, then what's the point of going to school? Because we need a sustainable future, and we aren't getting that. We aren't getting any government action on climate change. We aren't seeing any just transitions, and we need this.
OK, I'm going to quickly go to the next question. It's also on climate change, slightly indirectly. It's from Bibi O'Loughlin.
16-year-old climate change activist Greta Thunberg's activism has been discounted by people who refuse to take her seriously because of her age and her diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. We are frequently encouraged to create positive change as the future generation, but when young people like Thunberg attempt to do this, they are patronised and ignored. How are we supposed to create positive change when we are likely to be disregarded?
Aurora, I'll start with you there.
I mean, look, right now we have a panel of 4 young people. We have a room full of young people. If that's not showing you that we should take young people seriously, I don't know what is. Greta is amazing. She is an inspiration, and, you know, I really don't get why people patronise her because of her age. So what that she's young, she's taking a stand for what she believes in, she's doing it in a right way, and she's making a message that is heard all around the world. That is so important in this day and age as well. And back on her diagnosis of Asperger's, I mean, just because a person has a mental illness or anything like that doesn't mean they're any different to us, and that we should take them just as seriously. I mean, I myself have a disability, and I'm being taken seriously in this regard, and I think everyone should, no matter what their ability or disability is. So.
Aurora, what did you make of Andrew Bolt's comments about Greta Thunberg? I've never seen a girl so young with so many mental disorders treated by so many adults as a guru.
I have a personal opinion on Andrew Bolt. Don't we all?
What about what he said, though, the implications of it?
I think it's complete nonsense, if I'm being honest. It's complete nonsense. Yeah, him. That's all I'm going to say on that one.
Willoughby, what do you think?
Going to your question, Bibi, I don't think young people should be speaked down to because of their age. I don't think we should be discouraging young people from actually speaking about issues that really matter to them. And it's good to see that young people do care about these issues, but as Gladys touched on previously, there is a right way of going about these things.
What's the right way, do you think?
Well, I think what Gladys said about creative ideas of protesting on campus and going through a school, because we're not... and Gladys also talked about this, is that we can't make a dramatic switch to 100% renewable energy just like that. And we need to remember that there are massive bureaucracies in the way of making these changes as well. But talking about what you said, Tony, we do need to encourage young people to speak out, but organising things such as school debates and school forums will not only encourage young people to speak out, but to also hone in what they believe in, and it will actually encourage students to strengthen on their debating skills, and thus they will be able to better communicate their ideas to the public and make a really strong difference in the public debate.
Willoughby, do you have any thoughts about Greta Thunberg and the extraordinary impact this young woman from Sweden has had on the rest of the world? She's certainly mobilised huge numbers of young people across the planet.
Oh, and there's no doubt that Greta Thunberg has made a massive difference in this debate, and it's good to see that young people are stepping up in this situation. It's something that should be encouraged, is that young people do speak out and that they do care about these issues. Going to Andrew Bolt's comments, if I may, just not right, bang out of order. You shouldn't be talked down to because of your age or whatever disability you have, because how are we supposed to encourage people to debate and speak if we're just saying you're a disturbed messiah of the climate change movement or whatever? So there is a right way of going about these things, and Andrew Bolt certainly, with those comments, is not going down the right path.
The voice of civil society, thank you very much. Varsha.
Well, Greta Thunberg has been so inspiring. I know I've personally been so inspired by her, and I think that instead of using that platform that Andrew Bolt has to criticize her like that, he needs to congratulate her for being able to overcome those disabilities or whatever they may be. Because that's amazing that a young person is able to mobilize a global movement that is attempting to achieve change when our politicians clearly aren't doing enough. So I think we should congratulate her more than anything.
Yeah, well, in Loxton, had you heard of Greta Thunberg?
Yes, I have heard of Greta Thunberg before, and I think it's great when youth get out there and make a stand for what they believe in and are able to explain why they believe it and able to, represent why they believe what they believe too. And I think we need to have free speech in this country.
Did you get a chance to actually watch her talking?
No, I haven't really ever watched her give a speech before, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, I will just say that, like, you know how she's going on her sailing trip at the moment. I kind of, because her parents, a lot of them are actually flying over on planes too. So although it's good that she's trying to show how she's reducing carbon emissions, it's kind of a bit of hypocrisy there, because a lot of her family members are coming over on planes.
Well, I've just got to bring you up on something. You come from an area, the Murray River, is obviously prone to bad drought. It could be, according to scientific opinion, prone to terrible conditions if climate change worsens. But you're sceptical about the nature of climate change, aren't you?
Yes, I am a little bit sceptical of it. At the moment in the Murray-Darling Basin, we're suffering terrible droughts, and all over South Australia too. It's just devastating what we're seeing as well. And although I am a bit sceptical of it, I don't believe it should just be chucked away. I think we need to actually look at it too and have a respectful debate about it. We can't just say it's definitely this, but we have to ensure that we're having a debate about it to make sure we find the right way and ensure we're doing the best thing for Australia.
I'll get quick comments from the two politicians if I can. First of all, Premier.
Oh, thank you. Can I say one of the most inspiring human beings I've ever come across is Malala, I can't remember her last name, the 14-year-old...
Yusuf Say.
Yeah. 14-year-old who fought for the right just to go to school and nearly died. I get shivers when I think about her story. And there's an example of a young person who has changed the attitude of the globe and brought attention to such an important issue.
What's your message to Andrew Bolt?
My message to everybody is respect what young people have to say. And I was saying to some of the young panellists before that one of my favourite things in my job is to visit schools, and I often get inspired by ideas young people bring to me and tell me. So I would never ever discount what young people can achieve, because history has shown that age isn't a barrier for inspiring others and for bringing them to your cause. It's just a question of how you do it and how you actually bring people along with you. And I think that's really the key to inspiring change. It's how can you bring people to your cause. And in Malala's case, it was her absolute courage. Her life had already been threatened. It could have been threatened again, and she didn't care. She stood up for what she believed in, and I think that's a great example of a young person really changing the course of history and bringing attention to something that's so important.
Kristina Keneally. Oh, yeah, I'll come back to you.
At the risk of sounding like the old hand giving advice to the next generation, here's something I think Gladys and I would both agree on in terms of politics. It's adversarial. You're going to have to fight and argue. You're going to come up against opposition. Everything you believe in is going to be contested by someone else, and you're going to have to agitate. And sometimes that's going to get personal, and sometimes people are going to get nasty, and sometimes they're going to try to find ways to undermine you and undercut you. And the argument I would take out of Greta's experience and Andrew Bolt's comments is the more that people push back, the more effective you must be. The more they argue against you, the more threatened they must be by the argument you are making. And take that and wear it as a badge of honor. You know, if Andrew Bolt's attacking you, you must be doing something right. You must be having an impact. You must be influencing other people. You know, and the value that you have as change agents isn't in whether or not everybody agrees with you, because that's just not going to happen. The value you have is the impact that you have and the power you have and the ability you have to achieve change. And part of that is going to have to be withstanding the anger and the upset that causing change is going to inspire in other people, in your opponents. And yes, respect is part of it. You know, my view is don't play the man, play the ball. But there are going to be other people who don't play by those rules, and develop a tough skin and wear it as a badge of honor when someone like Andrew Bolt attacks you.
I'm going to move on because we've got so many questions to get through. You're watching the Q&A High School special. Our next question comes from Grace Alston.
Premier, you recently delayed the vote to decriminalise abortion because of pressure from Conservative MPs. Why are you allowing a minority of Conservative voices to influence the vote on the bodily autonomy of women and their right to be in control of their bodies and individual choices?
Thank you for the question, and I appreciate you asking it. I think it's really important on issues of conscience, which is what that is, to make sure that people feel they've been heard, to make sure people feel they've had a chance to consider all parts of the issue. And I appreciate that there are very strong views on this issue. New South Wales is the only state that hasn't taken that step. In fact, in South Australia, they took the step 50 years ago.
Let's just explain for the audience who don't know what the step is. It removes, your bill would remove abortion from the New South Wales Crimes Act, so that it's regulated as a health issue.
That's right, but I should say it's not my bill, it's not a government bill. It was actually brought forward by a private member. So an independent member brought forward the bill. And when there is an issue like that, our parties allow what's called a conscience vote. It doesn't happen very often, but it means that every member of parliament can vote according to their conscience or according to what their community feels, as opposed to what the party feels. So it's a free vote, in other words. And again, it doesn't happen very often.
But there are members of your party, the right wing, are blaming you for allowing it to actually happen. So that's why they say it's your bill, in a sense. Have you actually sort of shaken a hornet's nest here? Because you know, there are some who are saying this could cost you your premiership.
Well, I say to everybody, you know, when you're a member of parliament, you have to stand up and do what you believe is right. And I feel that everybody can look into their own conscience, can consider what their community, their electorate thinks, and then vote accordingly. And again, it's a rare opportunity to do that. And I've encouraged all of my colleagues to take that opportunity. And some felt we needed a bit more time, and I listened and I agreed. And I think it's appropriate for us to bring everybody together. We want a society that is actually brought together and not divided by issues like this. Because
yes, I'm just going to bring you to the question. I mean, is your leadership under threat if you push it too hard?
No, I believe this is an issue which has the potential to find enormous common ground. And when you listen to the speeches that people gave, if you listen to the attitudes that people had, there was so much common ground there. And I think we need to be respectful to know that for some issues like that, it's very deeply personal, and we have to give people the opportunity to express themselves and have time to consider their views.
But you are determined to have the vote?
Well, the bill, it's the private member's bill, and there's a process in place, and that has to come to its conclusion. OK, Aurora, what do you think about the politics of this? It's interesting how it's emerged. A lot of women actually wouldn't have even known that abortion was in the Crimes Act in New South Wales.
I mean, as a legal studies student, I am aware that it is in the Crimes Act of New South Wales. And for me, it comes down to it's my body, it's my choice. Really, I get that, you know, there is two sides to the story. You know, abortion for some is not what they want, and abortion for others is necessary. And, you know, I respect everyone's opinions on that, and I respect, you know, having to give people time to go over those opinions as such. But for me, at the end of the day, it comes down to it's not you getting the abortion, it's some woman getting the abortion. It's my body, it's my choice, it's my idea of what I want to do with my future. And I think that really is something that's being carried on through a lot of young women today. You can see with the protests that happen outside of the New South Wales Parliament with this bill coming into play, it is so important that we listen to young people and realise that my body is my choice.
Okay, not everyone has the same view. I've got a question from someone who doesn't. Danielle Safi.
I was once a 20-week-old fetus in my mother's womb, 20 weeks old. Had my mother made the heart-wrenching decision to terminate my pregnancy, I would not be here talking to you today. I deeply respect the rights of women, especially over their bodies. However, the life in the womb is another person with dreams and aspirations of their own. When will hearts and minds change so that we might, as a community, recognise the rights of these little ones to live?
Willoughby, I saw you nodding there, so I'll come to you first.
Thank you for your question, Danielle, and we need to remember that the issue of abortion is one that is extremely sensitive, and it's an important decision that is before the New South Wales Government. In terms of going to your question, yes, it is a serious issue, and we need to remember as well that 20-odd thousand people protested against this bill in the streets of the Sydney CBD, and we've seen similar numbers in Melbourne as well. So this is a big wake-up call to actually say that there are large amounts of people who are against this bill, and I think that people do need to recognise that that life, that baby, that fetus is a baby and it is a life, and it has just as many rights as someone who is out of the womb. It has just as many rights, and that is something that we truly need to honour as a society, to be a compassionate society and one that values the sanctity of life.
Varsha.
So I believe that if we don't decriminalise this, all we're going to see is just rising postpartum depression, rising child negligence. Because if women do not have the autonomy, if we do not have the authority, if we don't have the responsibility and just the liberation to make our own choice, because like Aurora said, it's our body, our choice. It's my body, it's my choice. I should have the right to do what I want. Women have been oppressed for centuries. And I don't think that I think that passing this bill, allowing us to decriminalise the act, gives us that autonomy. And I think we need that, because I do agree that life is beautiful and that life is so precious to us. But I also think if the child does not have a good quality of life, then I really don't know if that's worth it.
Kristina, I'll come to you first. I mean, you're a strong Catholic, and I'd just like to get your opinion on this. I know you've had a position for a long time about abortion, but what do you think about the bill here, the decriminalisation? Abortion obviously has been going on in New South Wales for a very long time, and people aren't going to jail for it. So the decriminalisation bill, doesn't that just recognise something that's already happening?
At one level, you're right, Tony. It does recognise a reality that's already occurring. And when I was Premier 10 years ago, there wouldn't have been the numbers in the Parliament to pass this legislation nonetheless, but it does recognise what's already happening. I want to say to Danielle, you know, I had a stillborn baby at 20 weeks, Caroline. I held her. I buried her. She's part of my family. I have photos of her at home. But I have to say, I have always believed that abortion should be safe, it should be legal, and it should be rare. I would like to see a society where all of us have access to effective and inexpensive, reliable birth control. But I also recognise that life is messy, it's not always straightforward, it doesn't always go as we plan, and that option of a medical service and of a decision that should be made between a woman and her doctor should be available. What I would say to Will is, while I have a lot of sympathy with your view about the sanctity of life and life before birth, I don't think it's as simple as saying that there is a point in the process where the person has the absolute same equal rights, the baby in the womb, as a person outside the womb. Now, for me personally, I would say that comes, after about the point of viability. But the point of viability keeps moving earlier and earlier in pregnancy, and it's going to challenge us legally and ethically as a society as it does. But the reality is, this is a complex matter. It is not something we can deal with simply or with absolutes. I don't agree with all pro-lifers that that life has complete and utter human rights from the point of conception to the point of birth. Nor do I agree with all pro-choicers that it has no rights at all. I think this legislation recognises a reality that's happening in New South Wales, that abortion is a choice that some people do need to have available to them, and it's taking out the criminal aspect of it. And I've already written to the Premier to express to her my support for it. I'm not too upset that she's delayed it, I have to say. I think there's some complexities about this legislation, that the upper house needs the time to do the job that an upper house does. You know, one I would point out, as I've pointed out to the Premier in my letter, is that the way we collect data in this state doesn't allow us to distinguish between miscarriage, stillbirth and abortion. And this is an opportunity, by decriminalising it, to change that so that we could actually get some good data about what's happening in women's lives medically. And that would be really useful.
OK, I want to go to William down the end, but just before I do that, Premier, you've heard what the young women on this panel have said, and I'm wondering whether you personally regard this as primarily a women's issue, the right to choose what happens to your body.
Whilst it's a very important issue for women, I think it is broader than that. I think everybody's entitled to an opinion on this issue. Many couples, families are involved, impacted by decisions made, by situations that arise. So I think it's broader than just a women's issue. I do feel it's an issue for the broader community. But I also find it interesting that other states certainly haven't had the level of public debate New South Wales has had. As I said, South Australia went down this path 50 years ago. Every other state's been down this path.
They don't have Barnaby Joyce.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I think what we have to accept, which is really important, is whilst the majority of citizens, I feel, would support decriminalisation, there is a group of people who feel very strongly that it should never even be legal. And we have to accept that. People have strong views, strong faith, and I respect that. That's what democracy is about. And so long as the debate happens in a respectful way and everybody has the chance to put their case down and try and convince each other of their case, I think that's what healthy democracy is about. And I've respected every opinion that I've heard. Everyone who's written to me, I've tried to write back personally too. And it's one of these rare opportunities where party votes don't matter. Every individual is equal. So every member of parliament has an equal right. The Premier doesn't get more votes than an ordinary backbench. We're all equal in this. And we all have to dig deep to find out what we believe is the right thing to do.
William.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive issue at the moment, and it's we need to be careful of it. But I feel that we need to, for women that are having to go through this, it's a very tough time for them, and I think we need to make sure there's support services out there for them to ensure that, because even in my home state, I've known people that have been told to have abortions because they feel like their kids aren't going to, the doctors have told them the kids aren't going to be healthy and not going to be alive very well. And the baby's been born and they've been perfectly healthy and they've grown up to live very good, prosperous lives. But we need to ensure that we've got good support services out there to women to help them, because a lot of the big issues for abortion are financial issues and not feeling like they've got the support, and health issue, like health of the baby too. So we need to make sure we're there to support them.
OK, thank you. Let's move on. Remember, if you hear any doubtful claims on Q&A, let us know on Twitter. Keep an eye on the RMIT, ABC Fact Check and the Conversation website for the results. The next question comes from Lara Mason.
According to a University of New South Wales report released this month, strip searches conducted by police has risen almost 20-fold in less than 12 years. Many of these occur at music festivals. How can young people feel assured that when we attend these festivals, that our right to privacy and freedom is protected?
Well, Premier, I'll start with you because you're the ultimate, power here, I suppose.
Can I say, without divulging confidences, I actually had some parents raise something concerning that they felt happened to their daughter, and I actually listened to their issues, and the Police Commissioner in New South Wales very kindly did as well. So we want to make sure that people are safe when they attend any event, music festival or otherwise, but also that they're treated respectfully and appropriately. So we're always looking at ways in which we can improve the respect that young people feel they're receiving, but also, you know, the difficult thing that I have as Premier is, you know, first and foremost, keeping the community safe. And it's always difficult knowing where to draw the line on what community safety means.
So what do you make of the argument that that festival goers who inevitably, young festival goers who inevitably will use drugs, you know that's going to happen, will be safer if you allow pill testing at festivals?
Yeah, look, a lot of people raise this issue with me, and if I thought there was concrete evidence to say that pill testing would save lives, we'd go down that path, but unfortunately there isn't, and I explain why. Unfortunately, a number of deaths that have occurred in New South Wales, and I can't imagine what the families and friends would go through if a young person was tragically taken that way, is that it's the actual pure drug that's killing the young people. So even though the pill test might say this is a pure drug, there's no other substance in there, that can still kill a young person. And I could live with myself if young people were given a false sense of security. And people say, oh, you might save one life. Well, potentially you might take 20 others by giving people a false sense of security that the pill's okay. The bottom line is, you could call me old-fashioned if you like, but illegal drugs are illegal for a reason, and everybody's body is different. And one dose might impact one person one way, but I just say if a substance is illegal, it's illegal for a reason. Please go and have fun, enjoy yourselves, but don't risk not coming back to your family and friends, because there's nothing worse than seeing a young people's life.
Let's quickly go back to our questioner, Lara. Are you convinced by these arguments?
Well, according to the same report, between 62 and 65% of the time, no drugs were actually found on people's strip search. So why would my privacy have to be threatened by the 30 to 40% who decide to take illegal drugs or to supply at music festivals? So I don't understand why, my privacy would have to be compromised when majority of people are doing the right thing.
Yeah, you mentioned that parents have come to you,
and
some people would see strip searching as somehow akin to sexual abuse.
Well, definitely. I say to the point you raised that when concerns were raised with me, I then pursued them. And if there's a better way for us to keep young people safe, of course we'll look at that. There's no doubt that we need to make sure we're having better conversations with young people. Why has the incidence of drug taking increased at these festivals? Why are people dying? Why are people sustaining serious injury? And I think what people are crying out for, whether it's arguing for pill testing or otherwise, young people want to have a conversation. They want to know what's safe, what's not. I think there's an obligation on governments to have that conversation with young people. But by the same token, I'd say to young people, things are illegal for a reason. We're trying to keep everybody safe, and pill testing won't solve the problem.
All right, let's have a quick conversation with the young people here. And Aurora, start with you.
Well, for me, I do agree. You know, you shouldn't risk your life over one pill. And, you know, I understand that young people, we're still going to, venture into the world of drugs and alcohol. It's inevitable. In Australia, we have a culture of, savouring underage drinking and drug taking. It's a thing. In my trips over in America, people are like, oh, do people in Australia really underage drink? Do you really take drugs? Yes, it's a fact, we do. I know people in my school who have done it. I know people in my community have done it. And I think it's true, government does need to have that conversation with young people, what's safe, what's not, how can we help, and I think that's really important. And, I have to agree with Gladys on this one. Until there is concrete evidence that pill testing is going to help, I think, there's no way of going about it without the evidence backing it.
What do you think, William?
I agree with Gladys here, because it is just important to keep Australians safe and keep our youth safe too, because I couldn't imagine what it would be like for a mother and father if they came home and found out that their child had died because, they'd taken a pill at a festival, and it would just be terrible.
Varsha?
I completely agree with the Premier on the fact that we need a conversation with young people, but I don't think there's been a way that we really facilitated this conversation. And for me, I believe that pill testing at music festivals, from what I've read and from what I've heard, is that when people go to these pill testing tents, they have a conversation with a professional. And a lot of the times, they reevaluate their choices. They rethink whether they actually want to take this drug. And I think that those reevaluations are so necessary and they're so vital, and they're showing us that perhaps pill testing is the answer, because for a lot of people, these strip searches are, they're just very triggering of past sexual assaults or anything that they've had. A lot of interviews have said that. And I think for women and for males, It's just so important to consider that because I don't think we want anybody to have those kind of experiences.
Kristina.
So when I was Premier, we legalised the King's Cross Injecting Centre. Labor brought it in the 1990s. Yeah, I do think harm minimisation has a role to play. I do think that pill testing deserves a trial in New South Wales. I don't know where we're going to get the evidence as to whether it works or not unless we have a trial. And I know that when we have the opportunity to have these conversations, an intervention of sort, we can guide people to making better decisions at the most crucial point. The Premier is correct to raise some of the risks, but the risks are already there. People are taking these drugs, and as much as my youngest child who loves to go to music festivals and gets a lecture from his mother every time, don't put anything in your mouth. I'm well aware that there are young people that are going to do that. Can I say on the point about policing that the police have a job to enforce the existing laws. The methods that they use, though, are something that you can write to your local member about. You can write to the police minister about. You can raise with the Parliament because the police are literally doing the job that they are being asked to do by the Parliament. It is up, if there are concerns, and people have already raised them with the Premier, they need to be taken up with the Parliament.
Willoughby.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Georgia, and I think it's a really important issue because there are young people who do want to go to music festivals and have a good time, but I think we need to remember as well, as the majority of the panel have pointed out, that we need to remember that these pills, they do have the potential to kill people. And it's extremely unfortunate when kids just have these pills in hand and they think that I'll just have this and I'll have a good time. And I think we need to encourage, our first line of defence should be to encourage more programs to be able to educate children about, and teenagers, the potential harm of taking a pill that you don't know about, you just have it in your hand, because I couldn't imagine there would be nothing worse than not coming home to see your parents. It would just be extremely unfortunate, and I think that it does lack concrete evidence that pill testing does work until such a time that we can find that. I think that that there are more measures that we can take, educating our youth about the dangers of taking these pills, because Aurora is right, that we do have this culture of underage drinking and drug taking, and it's unfortunate, and that shouldn't be the case. So I think that, more education programs to inform our youth, to make sure that they are best equipped to go about their business in a fun way, but in a safe way.
OK, let's move on. We've got quite a few issues to cover still. This question from Georgia Hansard. Georgia.
After Alan Jones made offensive comments regarding New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinta Ardern, telling Scott Morrison to shove a sock down her throat, he claimed that he is the victim of a ruthless social media campaign. An everyday Australian would simply be fired from their workplace for such comments. So why, when someone with a high public profile is not held to the same level of accountability?
Premier, at risk of offending Alan Jones.
Well, look, can I say, a lot's been said on that topic, but can I say generally, this isn't an issue that's come up once in these circumstances. Lots of people from time to time have made comments of this nature, and I think no matter how strongly you feel about any topic, the important thing is to talk about it respectfully, and I think that's a given. What I tend to do in all circumstances is when you're in a position like mine, you need to focus on your job at hand, and I find, especially in the age of 24-hour media cycles, so much is said every hour, every day, day after day. And what's really important in this environment is for all of us to stay focused on what we believe is the right thing, but also focused on the job we have at hand. And obviously, people differ on their views as to how offensive a comment may or may not be. And if anybody feels like that, well, you've got the chance to call it out, and you should. But having said that, I think generally speaking, I've been in positions on many occasions where things are said in lots of different environments, and And I think the message to learn is all of us always need to be respectful to each other.
Do you think that, I mean, there's a tradition, isn't there, of politicians being intimidated by Alan Jones, and it's traditionally been seen as kind of dangerous to criticise him. And whilst I appreciate what you're saying, I wonder if you're steering away from any direct criticism of him for that reason.
Well, can I say that I've felt personally offended by many journalists on different radio stations and different places. I mean, it's not I think it's unfair to limit it to one person, to be honest, because I've been in situations where I've thought, gee, I wish someone would stick up for me and say something about that. But I think what is important is for all of us to, if we, and people have different versions of what they find offensive and obviously sometimes there are clear-cut cases, but in other times it's not so clear. People should call it out, because we need a culture of respect, a culture of where people feel their contribution or how they're being questioned by somebody is in a fair circumstance. And I think, unfortunately, there's lots of occasions around where people can feel offended by those comments.
Aurora, what do you think?
Alan Jones is threatened by a powerful woman. That's my opinion on that one. Jacinta Ardern she is amazing, and, for Alan Jones to come along and play the victim card, for someone who is prone to, making bullying comments, I guess, about people, I kind of find that funny that he has gone on to play the victim card here, yeah.
William, what do you reckon?
I think what Alan said was, yeah, he was completely wrong to say those comments about her. But I also believe the message he was trying to send at the same time, I didn't think it was necessary for Jacinta to say the things about Australia too, like to bring Australia into that whole, talk about us in the Pacific discussion too, it's like that.
So you took the view that she was kind of interfering in Australian politics?
Yeah, in a way, yes, I did. And but I do not think what he said was appropriate at all. I don't think he...
Varsha.
I completely agree with Aurora, the fact that Alan Jones is just threatened, because this amazing writer, Andrea Dworkin, once said that feminism requires precisely what the patriarchy destroys in women, unimpeachable bravery, and I believe that Jacinta Ardern is the emblem of that. She's just done so much. She's so powerful as a woman, and I think that's so important. And the fact that our politicians, we want to see more women in Parliament, obviously, and I think Jacinta Ardern is a symbol for that. And I think Alan Jones is simply just threatened.
Kristina, brief answer.
Alan was wrong. I have a really good relationship with Alan. I've known him for more than a decade, and I tell him when he's wrong, and I will be seeing him later this week, and I'll tell him then. I told him he was wrong when he said what he said about Julia Gillard. You asked why Alan is on air still. He's on air because he rates. Let's just be blunt about it. It's a market, and he rates, and people listen to him. If you don't like what he's saying, don't listen to him. That's part of taking away the power. And Gladys is right as well. If you don't like what he's saying, stand up and have an argument about it. The reality is people like that are always going to have a platform, and in some ways that platform is growing. Look at Sky News After Dark. That platform is growing in Australia. And so it's incumbent that we are having
It's growing to a very small audience.
Well, yes.
I mean, you're probably talking about 5,000 people watching at that time. But anyway, let's. They can correct me on that. That's a fact check you can do, Sky.
I used to work for Sky. I probably could fact check you right here, but I won't.
Can if you like. You want to double that? Willoughby, what do you think?
Yeah, certainly those comments were just bang out of order. Just what were you thinking sort of moment. But I do agree with William that what he was actually trying to say was taken away by the fact that he made that comment, which was just grossly inappropriate. The thing with Alan is that I agree with Kristina, he rates, and that's why...
And he apologises from time to time.
Well, I don't really accept his apology because he was making excuses during the apology, so it's not a sincere apology to begin with. It's
clear that you haven't yet been elected.
No.
Give him time. Give him a few years to get there.
I'm only kidding.
But I certainly think that I see where Alan... so just to clear up again, those comments, poor, definitely wrong. No one should be talking to anyone like that, full stop. just completely disrespectful. But I can see where Alan was trying to say that he didn't appreciate, as an Australian, being talked down to by a foreign Prime Minister. And I think that the issue that was at hand was about the Pacific solutions to climate change. And I think that that's a really important issue, particularly to Australia, particularly in the region of the Pacific, because we are seeing that China is starting to exert its dominance over that Pacific region. And Alan was simply, I think what he was trying to say is that really, this is our problem, and let us take care of it. But the comments were wrong, and they shouldn't be repeated again.
Thank you, Willoughby. The next question comes from Ellen Levis.
At Corowa High School, there is a low student enrolment compared to other schools in the area, and the amount of youth in the town, with families preferring to send their children on long bus trips to major private high schools in other cities. This results in fewer opportunities for students of the public school system. For example, future Year 12 students are unable to study the course they want because of low numbers at our school, and fewer teachers, causing courses to be cancelled. How do we get more students back to the public system and more opportunities for Australia's future in the regional areas?
William, I'll start with you.
Yep. Yeah, for me, I go to a really good public high school in Loxton. They've given me so many opportunities, and the teachers work really hard for all of us, and so do our community members. And I think that's what's really important, to get a really good school, have a strong community behind you, and have strong teachers that really care. And for that to work, we need to make sure we're doing strategic funding too, to get the best economic outcomes. So make sure we're, looking at how we can best put money in to get the best outcomes for education in schools. And the issue of zoning for city students and stuff's not good. We need to make sure all schools are the same, because we all deserve to have a quality education, and we all deserve to have the same education as one another.
Gladys, Berejiklian.
Thank you for the great question. I'm a product of the public education system in New South Wales. In fact, when I started school, I couldn't speak English on the first day of school. And so I had inspiring teachers who really showed me the way and really allowed me to get a great education. I'm proud that in New South Wales, we're spending record amounts in public education, more than ever before. We're building 190 brand new schools, upgrading existing schools, clearing the backlog. But we also know it's not just the new buildings, it's what's happening inside the classroom. And we need to support our teachers, we need to inspire them to be able to do their job well. And if there's a specific reason why people aren't going to a particular school, we need to work out why and deal with it at a very local level, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all. Different communities have different responses or different situations, and I think it's really important for us, and that's what we try and do in New South Wales. If we do see there's a challenge around one school, what's occurring there that's not occurring elsewhere? How do you
deal with that? I mean, it's a critical issue in the cities as well, because you get school shopping going on.
It is.
With people moving to higher socio-economic public schools because they think they're going to get a better education for their children, and often the results prove they're right.
Well, look, we always support a parent's right to choose where they send their child, but we also have a fantastic program in New South Wales, which I hope I have quick time to explain, called Bump It Up. So we looked at some schools which weren't doing as well in literacy and numeracy as other schools, and then we tried to work out why that was, and we actually got to the root cause. And at least 2/3 of those schools we focused on got better results in education, and that meant more students coming to the school. So we've actually got this program, and the pilot was so successful. We started it out in about 30 schools, and it's been so successful. I said to the Minister and to the Education Department, let's make this practice. So now that's policy in New South Wales. So we make sure if there's a school that, for whatever reason, isn't doing as well as schools around it, we actually go into the school, ask the right questions, and the teachers and principals involved have been amazing, because rather than saying, why are you looking at us, they're saying, well, help us make our school better, and it's been just a wonderful response.
Aurora, what do you think?
I mean, I have been to both public and Catholic schools, so for me, I have to agree with what the Premier is saying here. You know, I really encourage the Bump It Up program. I think that is a great initiative, and we do really, with what Will said, looking at strategic funding and making sure it's going into the right places is really important as well.
Varsha.
So Personally, for me, I moved areas like where I lived to go to a certain school, and I think I can say that a lot of people have done this too. And I think what this does is it fosters certain areas to be academically excelling, doing really well in like arts programs, sports programs, and then you have these other areas which are just left behind. And I think programs like Bump It Up are just amazing, but we just need to see an increase in them, because especially with like regional and city schools, there's definitely a difference in funding and just like transportation in itself. So I think if we saw an increase in just like terms of infrastructure, transportation, and more prevalence in programs like Bump It Up, then I definitely see that Australia could be a lot more prosperous in their education system.
So Varsha, are you saying your family took a kind of positive choice to seek out the best public school you could find?
Yeah, for sure. And it was just, it's kind of, especially coming from an Indian heritage personally, I can say that there's just a search for like the best education system or just things like that. And I know that that's one of the reasons that I moved suburbs, yeah.
Kristina?
First, I would like to pay tribute to New South Wales government, because under the Gladys and her predecessor Mike Baird, they were the first to stand up for the Gonski funding and to agitate for proper funding for public schools. And they took a real leadership role at a risky time. That is, when they were opposing their own Liberal counterparts at the federal level. And so I think that need deserves to be acknowledged. But you know, we're talking about a national challenge here, and that does require a national solution, and the Commonwealth government has a significant role to play in that. You know, where I will have a great deal of sympathy for all of our state governments is that they are being asked to manage growth in population, often in areas that they don't have much control over, who moves to their state and how many people move there. They're being asked to manage that with limited resources, and they are dependent on a Commonwealth government that redistributes the tax dollars and determines how much can go into areas like education and health. And so what New South Wales did was incredibly important. It is incredibly important that we have got a proper funded public education system. I do think there are a range, though, of inequality in our system. Public and private is one, regional and urban is one, and then when we get into the tertiary sector at TAFE, where we've had cuts to TAFE funding and apprenticeships and traineeships versus universities is another. And you know, this is the fundamental basis for reducing inequality in our community. And what do we know right now? It's growing. And so, you know, my argument would be that we need a proper investment from the Commonwealth in all stages, and particularly in all levels of public education, and in that I would particularly include TAFE and what comes after the high school sector.
Willoughby.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Ellen. And I think it comes to a broader issue about schools funding. But one thing that we do need to remember as well is that it's not a perfect system, and it's one that certainly is flawed. And there's always a spectrum of schools in terms of their quality. And I think that what we're seeing in this country now on a broader scale is that people are leaving the regions and moving into the cities, and that's something that is extremely concerning. Because infrastructure can't keep up with this population boom. But going more directly to your question about the education sector, I totally agree with William that everybody should be able to access a world-class education, particularly in a country like Australia. And I
tell you what, if we could prove that the regional schools were just as good as the ones in the city, people wouldn't leave in such numbers, I suspect.
Can I interject here, though? To be blunt, the Commonwealth right now is really trying to send its temporary migration in particular to the regions. They have a number of programs that are really focused on trying to get people to the regions.
Yep.
Now, you can make lots of arguments about whether or not the services are there or the jobs are there to support it, but some regional communities are actually saying this is actually going to help keep our schools and hospitals open. There are other challenges that come with that, and I'm not entirely convinced the Commonwealth is yet investing in addressing some of those other challenges. But there is a potential there,
Willoughby, we did cut you off, so quick 30-second answer.
So going back to your question, Ellen, in terms of education, I think that there is certainly more that has to be done to make sure that children all across Australia can have that access to a quality education. And education is something that really does set you up for life. that has been touched on, and I think that everybody should be able to access that. It doesn't matter whether you're public school, private school, regional cities, and it's something that needs to be looked at, I think, definitely.
Right, sadly, and as always, we're running out of time. We have time for one last question. It's from Connor Ryan. Connor.
Despite wearing a uniform to look presentable, why is wearing a uniform so imperative to how students learn in schools? How does a uniform affect the actual learning of students?
Yeah,
I like
it's
this
a
topic.
good question. All right, we're all wearing uniforms.
How much time
on
do
this
I
panel.
I personally like wearing a uniform. Like, it just gives me pride in my school too, in what I wear as well. And yeah, we don't normally wear this uniform everywhere around school. Like, this is just our bit of our showy uniform.
You look very smart, by the way.
Thank you.
It's your national television uniform.
Yes, this is our national television uniform.
Every school should have one.
Yeah.
Gladys, what do you think?
I love the idea of a school uniform. You'd expect me to say that, but I'll tell you why. Because I feel it actually is equalising. Everybody's the same. So not everybody can afford the best clothes or the best way to look. And I just feel everybody can take pride in their school, pride in their uniform, and not be judged by what they're wearing. And that's something I'm proud of the Australian system. I actually think it's a positive. I've seen systems elsewhere, and Kristina's actually gone to a US school, so she might have some insights. But I feel that a uniform makes, every time we enter the school gate, we're all equal. We're all there to learn and do our best and be our best, and I think the uniform reflects that.
Aurora.
I mean,
is it an equalising factor?
It definitely is, and it's also great not having to wake up every morning and pick out an outfit. I know exactly what I'm going to be wearing. When I was living in Colorado, I think I tried for the first 2 weeks to pick out an outfit, and then it was pyjamas from then on out. I was not bothered to keep changing my clothes, and it definitely is an equalising factor. I mean, we all look as one. We all are not, comparing, who's got this label, who's got that label, who has the better clothes, who has the more expensive clothes. We all wear the same uniform, we all come into the school gate looking the same, and, some people may argue that, it's a factor of uniqueness. It's not going to address that, we are all unique people, but I think, there should be some leniency with uniforms, letting us use it as a form of expression, but at the same time, it does unify us, so, yeah.
Willoughby.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting question. And I think that we need to remember as well that it is an equalising factor because not every kid can afford to walk in wearing Gucci or whatever. So there certainly can be, to an extent, a bit of an unconscious sort of judgment of students who aren't necessarily wearing the greatest clothes. And something that we can take pride in is the school that we are at and proudly say, I'm a student at this school. So I think it's definitely something that's worth maintaining. It's something that should be enforced in our school system as well.
Kristina, we've all seen the American movies. We know that they wear whatever the hell they want, and not even with laces.
Yeah, well, I went to a Catholic high school, went to Catholic primary school, so I actually wore a uniform in America, which I, at the time, hated. I thought, this is so awful, right? And then I realised all the benefits when I went to university and suddenly had to pick out what I was going to wear and had to think about what other people were wearing, and everything you wore sent a message about what you were, who you were, and what you were trying to say. It was all, I was with you. Let's go to the pajamas, frankly. But here's the other thing: in life, you're going to wear uniforms. That's the reality of it. Gladys and I both wear a form of a uniform when we go into Parliament. Various jobs have uniforms. Tony doesn't rock up in something much different every week than what he's wearing right now. I mean,
different tie.
This is what life is like. And sometimes you just have to dress for the occasion.
I do this for my mother, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Tie especially. Varsha.
Well, I went to school in the US for a bit, for about 4 years, and there was no uniform. And one thing my family always says is that it costs a lot of money because, you got to buy new clothes every single day. It's a lot. But one of the things is, I feel like it hinders our freedom of expression just that little bit. And I think that's something that's really, really important, especially as we're growing and developing in high school. I think that's very vital to who we become. But I also do see it as an equalizing factor to an extent. So I feel like the fact that You know, like Willoughby was saying, we all can't afford Gucci. I think that's so important to remember. So I do agree that we need uniform, but I think like Aurora was saying, a little bit of leniency to at least wear the colour of socks that we want instead of black or white would be lovely. So yeah.
We're going to have to leave it there, and I might say for the future Q&A host, tank tops and tattoos are going to be the thing. So if you're not prepared to try that out, just forget it. That's all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel: William Gillett, Gladys Berejiklian, Aurora Matchett, Willoughby Duff, Kristina Keneally, and Varsha Yajman.